Late at night, I saw someone crouching on my roommate's bed across from mine. The figure was pressed tightly against my roommate's body, its back arched in an exaggerated curve. But my roommate was in deep sleep, seemingly unaware of the presence on top of her. Suddenly, the figure's head turned toward me with an eerily slow movement. I quickly pulled my head back. My heart was pounding like a drum. Liu Xian's bed was diagonally across from mine. I could clearly see someone lying beside her. The person had long, black hair, presumably a girl. I felt both scared and confused, because Liu Xian had severe mysophobia. She never allowed anyone to sleep in her bed. I remember a few days ago, when we were eating in the cafeteria, I accidentally dripped some sauce on her clothes. Liu Xian gave me the cold shoulder for several days after that. Who could this person be, lying next to Liu Xian? I even thought I might be hallucinating. So I put on my glasses and carefully pulled back my bed curtain *** to take another look. This time, the girl had turned around. Her face was pointing upward. In the darkness, I couldn't make out her features clearly, but for some reason, I could see her eyes distinctly. What chilled me to the bone was that her eyes were wide open, staring straight at the ceiling. Suddenly, I saw her eyes move. Or rather, her eyeballs slowly rolled sideways in my direction. She had noticed me. I quickly withdrew my head and wrapped myself tightly in my blanket, shaking violently. You should know, I'm someone who can't even watch horror movies. At this moment, I was terrified beyond measure. The other roommates were all asleep. I could hear 3 steady breathing patterns. Wait, why only 3? My eyes widened. Why couldn't I hear any breathing from the person lying next to Liu Xian? Just then, I heard a creaking sound. This sound was familiar to me. The dorm beds were old, and whenever someone sat up, they would make this creaking noise. The sound came from across from me. Clearly, someone had sat up. Cold sweat formed on my forehead. The person who sat up couldn't be Liu Xian. If it were Liu Xian, she would have screamed already at finding someone next to her. It was that person who sat up. Despite the room being quite warm, I felt terribly cold. Creak. Then, I heard footsteps on the ladder. That person was coming down the steps. My heart was racing. I had never been this scared before. Just then, I felt my bed shake slightly. Someone had climbed onto the ladder beside my bed. By now, I was drenched in sweat. Creak. Several spine-chilling scratching sounds emerged. The old ceiling fan above made squeaking noises as it turned. The wind lifted a corner of the bed curtain at the foot of my bed. In that instant, my pupils contracted sharply. A pair of pale feet stood at the top of the ladder. The toes pointed directly at me. The big toe was grotesquely twisted outward. I trembled in. The bed curtain fell back down, but I could clearly see a human silhouette through the curtain. She was crouching at the top of the ladder, watching me motionlessly. Suddenly, I heard the sound of my roommate Huang Lan pulling back her bed curtain. Huang Lan was in danger, although my relationship with Huang Lan was just average. At this moment, I couldn't care less about that. I immediately pulled open my curtain. Huang Lan had one foot out, stepping onto the ladder. Our eyes met by chance. Huang Lan smiled at me. I drank too much bubble tea * tonight. Just going down to use the bathroom. That entity simply vanished from the ladder. I returned a somewhat awkward smile to Huang Lan. Suddenly, my eyes caught sight of the bed behind Huang Lan. In that instant, I felt a chill run through my entire body again. I saw that on the bed behind Huang Lan, the blanket was raised in the shape of a human form. That entity was hiding in Huang Lan's bed. My pajamas were soaked with cold sweat, clinging tightly to my body. Despite being in the peak of summer, with the dorm room unbearably stuffy, I suddenly shivered uncontrollably. My throat made a hoarse sound as I raised my trembling hand, pointing behind Huang Lan. Seeing my strange expression, Huang Lan turned around with a confused look. But she saw nothing. Her blanket was perfectly flat again. That person had vanished into thin air once more. My throat was too tight to speak. When I didn't say anything, Huang Lan climbed down to use the bathroom. Being quite timid, she liked to leave the door slightly ajar when using the bathroom at night. From my angle, I could see Huang Lan squatting down. Not having a habit of watching people in the bathroom, I quickly turned away. But at that moment, I felt an extremely strong sense that something was wrong. I've always trusted my intuition since childhood. When I was little, 5 minutes before our kitchen exploded, I suddenly started crying uncontrollably in the living room. Mom rushed out from the kitchen to hold me, and shortly after, the kitchen exploded. I must have seen something just now. Trembling, I turned my head back. At that moment, my eyes met with Huang Lan's. Her eyes were wide open, with corners exaggeratedly upturned. The effect was so extreme that there was too much white visible, with tiny pupils. Huang Lan stared at me intensely. I finally realized what had felt wrong. The big toe on her slippered foot was grotesquely twisted outward, as if someone had forcibly broken it. Her lips slowly curved into a smile. "So you saw me, hand," and my eyes began to sting from extreme fear. Trembling, I turned to look at the opposite bed where the real Huang Lan was sound asleep, one leg kicked out from under her blanket. The person in the bathroom wasn't Huang Lan at all, but when I turned back to look at the bathroom, the fake Huang Lan had already vanished. My heart felt like it would burst from my chest, because I felt something ice-cold press against my back. Cold sweat continued to pour from my forehead. My teeth were chattering uncontrollably. So cold, unnaturally cold. From the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of something pale white on my shoulder. It was a slender hand resting on my shoulder, with blood-red nail polish. In the darkness, it had a terrifyingly strange yet beautiful quality. My entire body shook with fear. I didn't dare turn around, because I could imagine what was behind me. That person was right there, pressed against my back. Her body was pressed tightly against me. Her temperature was unnaturally cold, like pressing against a block of ice. But soon, this cold sensation disappeared. I let out a heavy sigh of relief. I felt the presence behind me had vanished. I've never believed in ghosts, but everything that happened tonight made me question if strange things might exist in this world. Just as I was about to lie down, something hard pressed into my back. I felt around and found a dark red button. This button was clearly quite old. Its paint was chipped and worn. For some reason, this button felt familiar, but I couldn't remember where I'd seen it before. This unexplained button gave me a very uncomfortable feeling. Frowning, I threw the button away, but after a full minute, I hadn't heard the sound of it hitting the floor. Normally, in the dead of night, even a tiny button dropping would make a clear sound. But I heard nothing. It was as if someone below had caught the button in their hand. This thought terrified me all over again. Suddenly, my bed curtains slowly parted from the middle. An unnaturally pale hand rested on my bed's railing. Her fingernails weren't intact. The thumbnail was broken, stained with dark, dried blood. I bit my lip hard, shrinking further into the corner. Until my back pressed against the wall, I had nowhere left to retreat. That hand twisted around, not in a normal rotation, but violently bending backward from front to back. I heard the horrifying sound of bones cracking. In her palm lay the dark red button. The button gently slid onto my bed. The hand slowly withdrew. I was breathing heavily, my lips trembling uncontrollably. Shaking, I picked up the button this time. I didn't dare throw it away carelessly. Suddenly, I noticed something strange about the button. I turned on my phone's flashlight and examined it carefully. There were 2 tiny characters engraved on the button. If not for my strong intuition, I would never have noticed these letters smaller than ants. Squinting, I tried to make out the characters. Suddenly, my hand trembled, and the button slipped from my grasp. On the button were 2 chilling characters. Leave. What did these 2 characters mean? Leave where? Was it telling me to leave this dormitory? I didn't understand. When I woke up again, it was already 7 in the morning. I was awakened by the sound of water in the bathroom. Lu Xian was in the bathroom, washing up. My temples were throbbing painfully. Could everything from last night have just been a dream? But the next second, what my hand touched shattered my illusion. It was a hard, dark red button. Everything from last night wasn't an illusion. It was all real. Xiao Tian, hurry up and get down here. Did you forget we have an early class at 8 today? It's a joint class with 2 departments, so we should dress up nicely. Who knows, we might run into some handsome guys from the law department. Huang Lan said with a cheerful smile. I absent-mindedly responded with a hum. The joint class was held in a large classroom. Huang Lan linked arms with me, and I linked arms with Lu Xian as we walked into the teaching building. Seeing so many people helped dispel some of the gloom in my heart. Students were coming and going all around when suddenly, a girl bumped into me and knocked me to the ground. She kept her head down, muttered a few sorry-s, then hurriedly left. Huang Lan helped me up, asking, "Are you okay?" I shook my head, watching the girl's retreating figure, suddenly feeling a very familiar sensation. That girl was just like the person in our dorm last night. Suddenly, I felt something new in my pocket. I reached in and found a note. Written in red ink were 4 characters. Leave this place. My heart started pounding. What are you looking at? Hurry up! Huang Lan and Lu Xian called to me from ahead. I felt a vague sense of unease. The further we walked in, the colder it felt. It was the kind of uncontrollable shivering that I couldn't stop. Had this hallway always been this long? An uncomfortable, Strange feeling loomed over me, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what felt wrong. Huang Lan and Lu Xin walked quickly, constantly urging me from ahead. Bai Tian, why are you walking so slowly? Class is about to start. Huang Lan and Lu Xin impatiently urged me. At that moment, I stopped in my tracks. Finally, I realized what was wrong. It was the sound. The noisy hallway sounds, the students' chatter I didn't know when they had all disappeared. The entire teaching building was now deathly silent. So silent that I could hear my own rapidly beating heart. Bai Tian, hurry up. The modern literature professor loves taking attendance. And aren't you running for party membership this semester? You can't afford to be marked late. Lu Xin rattled on. Everything looked normal. Except for one thing, there was no sound. Even the birds chirping outside had vanished at this moment. I stood there looking at my two roommates, but my hair stood on end. Why were they walking on their tiptoes? Arm in arm, they balanced on their tiptoes, still urging me to hurry. And behind them, not a trace of light could be seen. Instead, there was only thick darkness. Only one classroom had a dim light on. I stumbled backward a few steps, because I clearly remembered there wasn't supposed to be a classroom there at all. Just then, a girl's whisper echoed in my ear. Leave. I suddenly opened my eyes. The teacher at the podium was explaining the content in the slides. Huang Lan leaned close to me and whispered, how did you fall asleep just now? If I hadn't woken you up, you probably would have been called out. When did I even get to the classroom? At this moment, my mind was confused and bewildered. Now, please turn to page 58. Today, we'll discuss the patterns in the development of modern Chinese literature. I opened the textbook, but was shocked by the dense small characters covering the page. Leave, leave, leave this place. The entire page was filled with just the word leave. For some reason, I instinctively covered these words with my hand. Suddenly, all sounds in the classroom disappeared. My two roommates were facing forward, seemingly paying attention to the lecture. But their eyeballs suddenly rolled to the extreme corners, staring intently at me. More precisely, they were staring at the textbook I was covering. The teacher at the podium seemed frozen in time, maintaining his pose with chalk in hand. The next moment, I saw everyone sitting in front of me slowly turning their heads toward my position. They weren't turning left or right. Instead, their heads were twisting backward from front to back. How could any normal person turn their head in such a way? Their heads were almost completely hanging behind their shoulders. I could even hear the sound of bones being twisted to their limit. At this moment, I had only one thought. Leave this classroom. Just as I was about to stand up, someone forcefully grabbed my hand. It was my roommate, Huang Lan. She leaned in close, her face very near mine, her eyes grotesquely wide. Xiao Tian, what's written in the book? At this point, I was terrified beyond measure. Although Huang Lan was usually a frail girl, at this moment, her strength was overwhelming. Are you keeping secrets from us? She stared intensely into my eyes. I've always been timid, and by now tears were already falling. Almost sobbing, I shouted at Huang Lan, let me go. The next moment, I felt the ground shake. The entire classroom began spinning. My head became dizzy, and my vision grew increasingly blurry. Before completely falling into darkness, I heard some strange sounds. It seemed like the footsteps of many people. I opened my eyes once again. The smell of disinfectant surrounded me. Lu Xin and Huang Lan stood by my side, looking at me with worried expressions. What's wrong with you? Did you over-diet? You fainted from low blood sugar during class, and kept muttering let me go. Huang Lan held my hand, nagging like a mother. Their expressions looked perfectly normal, showing their usual concern for me. My head felt dizzy, and my whole body felt weak. Could it be that I really did faint from low blood sugar? I struggled to sit up in bed. Just then, I heard something like the roar of an airplane. Did you hear an airplane? I asked, frowning. Lu Xin and Huang Lan both shook their heads. No, how could there be airplanes in our small town? Lu Xin took some candies out of her backpack. Xiao Tian, have some of these to raise your blood sugar. I reached out to take the candies. The packaging was appealing, but for some reason, I felt a strong aversion to them. Eat them, quick. Lu Xin stared at me intently, corners of her mouth turned up high. Never mind, I don't have an appetite right now. I returned the candies to Lu Xin. Lu Xin pressed her lips together, saying nothing, watching me expressionlessly. In that moment, I clearly saw a flash of malice in her eyes. Right then, a clear thought formed in my mind. I need to leave this place. Ignoring my roommate's attempts to stop me, I practically fled from the infirmary. The hallway was deathly silent. From the dark depths of the corridor, a dark red button rolled out. It rolled right up to my feet. Frowning, I bent down, about to pick up the button, but a hand beat me to it, picking up the button first. I stared fixedly at the hand hanging before me, skin pale as death, with blood-red broken fingernails. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I suddenly looked up, but there was nothing there. The button fell to the ground with a crisp sound. Upon careful examination of the button, I found another line of small text. Reverse flow. I thought for a long time but couldn't figure out what it meant. Suddenly, I heard my roommates' voices behind me. Xiao Tian, you're still weak. Why are you running around? I turned around to see my roommates' concerned faces. Bai Tian, why are you running so fast? Their voices were heavy with worry, but something seemed off about their appearance. Finally, when they got closer, I realized what was strange. Their necks had become very long, much longer than normal. The next moment, their heads suddenly drooped down, as if they'd lost all support. I could no longer contain my fear and screamed, running forward. When I reached the main entrance of the teaching building, I found it tightly locked. At this point, I was truly at the depths of despair. I kept banging on the door, but it wouldn't budge at all. The building's main entrance was never locked during the day. What was happening to everything? Suddenly, I jerked my head up to look at the sky. The sky was a gloomy darkness. When had it stopped being bright? Bai Tian, stop running. My roommates' voices were getting closer from behind. I turned around to see them with drooping heads, wearing exaggerated smiles. In desperation, I ran into the bathroom. I quickly hid in the last stall and locked the door. I crouched on the toilet, hugging myself, biting my lip hard to prevent any frightened whimpers from escaping. From outside, footsteps approached. Xiao Tian, what's wrong with you? Why are you hiding from us? You're really making us worried. My roommates' voices came from the entrance. I held my breath, not daring to make a sound. Creak. A scraping sound. They opened the door to the first stall. I was incredibly tense. My nails dug deep into my palms. Xiao Tian isn't in here, Huang Lan said, seemingly disappointed. I didn't see her run in here. Maybe she went somewhere else. Let's look elsewhere. Hearing Lu Xian's words, I immediately felt relieved. Soon, their footsteps faded away. But I still didn't dare come out. Just as my body began to relax, I suddenly felt two spine-chilling gazes upon me. I jerked my head up. Lu Xian and Huang Lan were hanging over the top of the door, their heads drooping, eyes bulging unnaturally as they stared at me. The next moment, my vision once again plunged into darkness. When I opened my eyes again, it was now 9 o'clock at night. I woke up in my dormitory bed. I heard my two roommates whispering below. Bai Tian's condition seems to be getting worse. What should we do? Should we notify the counselor? She really scares me like this, and I'm really worried about her. She's fainted several times now, and runs away whenever she sees us. The teaching building door was clearly open, but she was screaming as if she couldn't see it. When we tried to bring her back to the dorm, she ran into the bathroom like she'd seen a ghost, and ended up fainting in there. Lu Xian and Huang Lan's worried conversation hit me like a boulder to the heart. I suddenly pulled open the bed curtain. What do you mean? Lu Xian and Huang Lan were clearly startled, and they exchanged uncertain glances. After a while, Huang Lan carefully looked at me and spoke. Xiao Tian, when you first came to the dorm, you told us you had a strange condition. You experience intermittent memory loss and brief hallucinations. When you first came to the dorm, it only happened occasionally, but these past few days your condition has been getting much worse. My brain seemed to freeze. I had no knowledge of having such a condition, but what Huang Lan and Lu Xian said might be the most reasonable explanation right now. I examined them carefully. Their necks were normal, and they weren't standing on tiptoe. I felt in my pocket again. There was no button, nor the note that girl had slipped to me. Xiao Tian, we don't reject you. I know you're suffering too, and we'll do our best to help you. Huang Lan looked at me very gently. I believed about 70 to 80% of what they said, so I nodded and gave them a smile. A strong wave of drowsiness washed over me again. It was summer, and the ceiling fan was squeaking as it turned, yet I felt unusually cold. It was a cold that seemed to seep into my bones. I'm going to sleep now, I said groggily. This sleep was very unsettling. It seemed like a girl's voice kept calling my name. Bai Tian, wake up. You can't keep sleeping. Time is flowing backwards. Your life is flowing backwards too. There isn't much time left. My eyes snapped open instantly. It was cold. It should have been the height of summer. Yet when I breathed out, my breath turned to white mist. Drip. A drop of water fell on my forehead. Water drops began falling continuously from the top of the bed curtain. I was terrified. Suddenly, I felt my blanket move slightly, as if someone at the end was gently pulling it. My blanket slowly began to slide down. I stared intently at the corner of the bed. The bedsheet there was deeply indented, forming a stark contrast with the flat sheets beside it. As if someone was crouching there, a chill ran up my spine. Taking a deep breath, I threw the blanket over there with trembling hands. The blanket didn't fall flat on the sheet, but instead formed an arch, as if covering someone. My chest ached severely with fear. A suffocating feeling enveloped my entire being. From under the blanket, a pair of slender, snow-white ankles appeared. A dark red button rolled out from under the blanket. I picked it up with trembling hands. There was a line of tiny text carved into it. "Don't trust them." The next second, the blanket fell flat on the bed. The girl had vanished. Still shaken, I picked up my phone. It was 11 o'clock at night. Just as I was about to put down my phone, my forehead suddenly throbbed. I stared in disbelief at the time displayed on my phone. February 22nd, 11 p.m. But last night my phone had clearly shown February 23rd. I rarely paid attention to dates, so only now did I realize that time was flowing backwards. Small details I had overlooked began flashing through my mind. The word backwards written on the button, and the girl's voice I heard in my dream. Rather than trying to harm me, it seemed the girl was constantly trying to warn me. Time was flowing backwards. But what did she mean when she said my life was flowing backwards too? I heard my roommates whispering. She still seems suspicious of us, even though we've hidden all those things, those damn buttons, notes, and textbooks. My heart sank. So these things weren't hallucinations after all. What about Xiao Tian now? Huang Lan's words suddenly cut off. My heart jumped to my throat. The dorm suddenly fell silent. Cautiously, I carefully pulled back the bed curtain. Lu Xian and Huang Lan were crouching behind my bed curtain, their faces grotesquely distorted as they stared at me, their eyes nearly splitting at the corners. Xiao Tian is eavesdropping now, indeed. At that moment, I don't know where I found the courage. I pushed past my two roommates and ran out of the dorm room. In the corridor, only dim incandescent lights flickered. I gritted my teeth and ran forward desperately. The doors of the surrounding dorm rooms now seemed like monsters hiding in the darkness. Xiao Tian, if you keep running, we'll get angry. My roommates' voices came from behind. I turned my head to look. They were walking towards me on tiptoe, heads hanging low, neither fast nor slow. Suddenly, a door not far from my side creaked open. A pretty girl's face appeared behind the door. I knew this girl. She had visited our dorm before. "Quick, come in. They're dangerous," she said rapidly. As I saw my roommates getting closer, I was about to run in, when suddenly, I froze. At that moment, I was truly grateful for my sixth sense. "Hurry up, Xiao Tian," the girl urged anxiously as I still hadn't entered. I stared at her intently and took a few steps back. All dorm room doors pull open from the inside, but why did you just pull it open from the side? The girl looked at me expressionlessly, then suddenly broke into an exaggerated smile. Sensing danger, I desperately ran downstairs. But no matter how fast I ran, my two roommates effortlessly kept pace behind me. Though they appeared to walk slowly, they were getting closer and closer. I could clearly see their increasingly malevolent gazes. My strength was gradually failing, though the stairs weren't long, they seemed endless. Finally, my foot caught on something. I fell to the ground. What had tripped me was my roommate's hand. She gripped my foot tightly, her unnaturally small eyes staring at me intensely. "Our dorm has 3 people, and we can't lose any. You can't escape." Just then, a hand suddenly pulled me up forcefully. The girl I had seen earlier grabbed me and kept running forward. But she wasn't running fast. Her feet were severely twisted, almost stumbling as she dragged me along. Finally, we reached the entrance of the dormitory building. The sky was black as spilled ink. I hadn't remembered wrong. The sky here had never been bright. The girl stopped and turned her head. At this moment, I finally saw her face clearly. It was a familiar, delicate face. "Bai Tian, you must survive." The girl gave me a smile. This time, I didn't find her smile eerie or frightening. Instead, it felt warm and familiar. She took a button from her pocket and placed it in my hand. "My greatest wish is for you to remember me. I'm Xiu." I looked at the button in my palm, stained with dark red blood. Just as I raised my head to say something to her, I saw my roommates appear behind us. Xiu suddenly pushed me outward. My last conscious memory was seeing Xiu's smiling face. I felt wetness on my face. It seemed like raindrops falling on my face. "There's another one here, alive, a living person," I heard an excited voice. "Thirsty, so thirsty." My whole body ached terribly. Something heavy was on me. It felt awful. I struggled to open my eyes and saw many people. They were removing stones that had been pressing down on me. Someone lifted me up. I saw collapsed buildings all around, and many unrecognizable bodies on the ground. 2 of them were my roommates. Their necks were crushed out of shape, but their eyes were fixed in my direction. I was taken to the hospital, where many people came. My parents held my hands, crying uncontrollably. I wanted to tell them not to cry, but my throat hurt too much. The doctor told me I was lucky. A week ago, a landslide had occurred in my county. My school was right at the foot of the mountain. All students and teachers were buried in the ruins. Except for me, no one survived. After a long silence, I finally asked hoarsely, "Mom, Dad, do you know who Shushu is?" Mother gripped my hand and began trembling. She told me a truth I had forgotten in my memories. Shushu was a child who lived near my home. She didn't have a father, only a mother who worked at a bar. The first time I met Shushu was in front of a flatbread stall. Our small town didn't have as many delicious foods as big cities, and the flatbreads from the stall at 5 p.m. were a favorite among us kids. That day, Shushu was hiding in a nearby corner, eagerly watching the flatbread in my hand. She looked at the flatbread, and I noticed her throat move as she swallowed secretly. "Do you want some?" I asked, breaking the flatbread in half and handing it to her. Shushu hesitated for a moment, but she seemed very hungry and started eating it in big bites. "I'll pay you back someday," Shushu said earnestly, looking up at me with her small face. From then on, Shushu and I became good friends. Her mother was very beautiful, but she never took care of Shushu. My mother noticed that Shushu was much thinner than other kids her age, so she asked me to bring Shushu home for meals every day. We lived together, grew up together, got into the same middle school, then the same high school, and eventually received acceptance letters from the same university. On the day we received our acceptance letters, we hugged and cried. I thought we would always be together, but the summer after our senior year in high school completely separated us. After the college entrance exams, we excitedly planned a trip to a nearby coastal city. Our parents were initially reluctant to let us go alone, but they eventually agreed after my persistent persuasion. However, in that place, we encountered a nightmare that would haunt us forever. One day, Shushu and I went to the beach to watch the sunrise. At 5 a.m., the beach was deserted. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see the sunrise. Instead, we encountered 3 men who were like a nightmare. They looked about 20 years old and eyed us with ill intentions. I quickly realized the danger and pulled Shushu to run back to our lodging, but we were soon caught by them. I was the first to be caught. One man stepped on me while the other 2 grabbed my hair. Shushu tried to save me, but her frail body was no match for the 3 men. She used all her strength to divert their attention. Finally, the man holding me down released me to grab Shushu. "Bai Tian, run!" Shushu screamed at me with all her might as she was pinned down by them. My eyes were filled with tears, but I knew I had to escape and call the police to save Shushu. I gritted my teeth and ran forward with all my strength. Next to the beach was the coastal highway. In the distance, a car was driving towards me. Like grasping at a lifeline, I excitedly ran towards the vehicle. But in the next moment, a massive impact and pain made me lose consciousness. When I woke up, I was already in the hospital. The doctor said I had been in a coma for half a month. My awakening was a miracle. The driver who hit me had been driving all night and was drunk, completely disoriented at the time. Due to the severe impact to my brain, I completely forgot about Shushu. I forgot about the girl who grew up with me, forgot about calling the police. My parents, fearing it would traumatize me, didn't tell me about Shushu but secretly reported to the police. When the police found Shushu's body, it was in a cement tank by the sea. Mother told me that Shushu had been tortured for half a month before dying from the torment. After hearing my mother's words, I was already in tears. I searched for news about Shushu almost masochistically. Both her legs and arms were broken. Her big toe had been forcibly twisted off. So that's why she looked the way she did. But Shushu had held on for 15 whole days. Was she waiting for me all that time? Waiting for me to come back and save her? When I saw one particular line in the news, I could no longer control my grief and broke down sobbing. The news reported that in Shushu's hand, she had been tightly clutching a dark red button. That button was a gift I had given to Shushu when we were young. "Shushu, we'll always be together." I placed a bouquet of fresh flowers on Shushu's grave. "Shushu, I've come to see you," I said with a smile. A light yellow butterfly suddenly flew over and landed beside my hand.